Hello and welcome to another episode of Subculture. I'm Dave G, and joining me as my co-host,
I am a golden god!
it's Hully, and today we're going to be taking a pretty special look at some of the news that's been coming out over the past couple of weeks, revolving around my favourite superhero, and I think it's Harley's favourite superhero as well, Batman. So, Ray, let's kick it off. What has been happening in the world of Batman over the past couple of weeks? Because it's some pretty big news.
It's pretty big news. I mean, look, we've already had a lot going on in Batman with Ben Affleck out, Robert Pattinson in, but not in the Justice League movie. So how does this work? We don't know. But now we have the ultimate news, is that largely fan favorite Batman Michael Keaton is to return as Bruce Wayne.
And it's kind of weird circumstances. Like we said, there's been some weird stuff happening in Hollywood, as a lot of people probably would know by now. Robert Pattinson's film The Bat, they pushed it to the very limit to actually try and get the movie completed before the COVID lockdown, to the point where they were one of the last productions in Hollywood actually operating. They didn't quite get over the line though, so they've got to go back and shoot. And I've talked to some friends who work in Hollywood at the moment, and it doesn't look like they're going to return to work till October, November, and that's best case scenario. So it's going to be one of those weirdly kind of put together movies where, like, there's almost an element where some of it will be filmed a year after it was started, kind of thing. So the Michael Keaton Batman news. This is, again, a lot of things have been said about what's actually going to happen. It is going to be happening in the Flash movie, but we're now hearing that apparently Keaton is in talks with DC to be in 10 movies. He's been pretty active in saying that he's not going to be playing Batman, as in he won't have to pull on the suit, that he's playing more of a Bruce Wayne character. So we've kind of been looking at how that is going to work, because apparently the Flash movie is kind of going into one of the other dimensions where Bruce Wayne never became Batman, but Michael Keaton is saying that his Bruce Wayne did become Batman. So that looks like they're taking elements out of that storyline. I think it's the Doomsday kind of storyline that they're touching on. So
it seems weird. I think they're really playing up the multiverse aspect of things. I mean, with Flash being Flashpoint, of course, it ends up with, time changing. But how many different points we're going to go through to get to this bit will be interesting. And look, it's exciting news. He's always been like my favorite Batman, so
yeah,
having him back as Batman Bruce Wayne would be excellent. The idea of 10 films is quite interesting, though. That's a lot to be booked into.
I'm guessing a lot of those might just be kind of like the Samuel L. Jackson role in Marvel, where he might just show up in one scene kind of thing. So
yeah, to work, I don't know if it could be that he replaces Ben Affleck in the main Justice League sort of series, which, Affleck's Batman was supposed to be the slightly older, more grizzled Batman. Now he's a little bit older again, but one of the fan favorite sort of speculations that seems to be going everywhere is that they're doing Batman Beyond. So it's him training the next young Batman in the future. So that would be interesting as well. But again, 10 movies, he has to be turning up in all sorts of places for that to work.
Do you think they might be sitting on a bit of a secret there too? Is Ben Affleck going to come back and play Batman? We've seen Henry Cavill agree to come back and play Superman now that his little beef with the studio is gone. We know that Ben Affleck's, one of his major reasons for leaving was because Henry Cavill left, and he said he didn't want to play Batman opposite somebody else playing Superman. Is there a way that they could bring Ben Affleck back and use Michael Keaton as well?
Well, I think Ben Affleck had a lot of personal issues, which is why he eventually walked away from the whole thing as well.
He didn't like the fact that they didn't make Justice League a trilogy. That was one of the big things. He said that that kind of bought him when he wanted to do the role, because he heard the storyline. Yeah. So,
well, now that they're rectifying that, we are having the Snyder Cut. Yay! But it's going to be a HBO TV series now, so that's interesting. But still have to wait till next year. God damn it!
Yeah.
So.
And the Bat's been pushed back too. Of course, from what we just said before, that was
everything is.
kind of expected. But is this going to be even more confusing for people out there? Like, I don't know how many people I didn't talk to when Joker was out who went along and saw it, loved it, and said to me, "Oh, I can't wait for Joaquin Phoenix to play Joker in Justice League." And I had to say, that's actually not going to happen. It was a standalone movie. Now they're talking about doing a sequel. Is this just going to confuse people even more? Like, we were even talking before about, like, well, Robert Pattinson's not going to be in Justice League that we know of so far.
No, yeah,
so,
that's supposed to be a standalone thing.
Yeah.
So
is it going to become confusing where people who are used to, like, the Marvel kind of standard where Marvel do have standalone movies and stuff like that, but they all tie in to the bigger picture somehow?
I think the problem is that DC have been trying to do that tie-in, and they started doing it, and then all of a sudden they were doing stuff that wasn't part of it. So, like, why are you doing that? You're just making a mess. Like, you approved for something to be made, so just stick to your guns and let it be made, not come in at the last minute and say, you know what, we changed our mind, we want to change your direction completely. Like, don't do that. Just let it be what it's meant to be. And then if it's really bad, reassess it.
Yeah,
because don't make another one. But seriously, you've got stuff that's been working well. Now you're just making it messy, and people have an expectation that you were building this united universe. And yeah,
I still would love to have seen the TV series tie into the movies, like the different series that are out there.
That disappointed me.
Yeah, I would love to have seen Stephen Amell come in and play Arrow. The other bits of DC news that have been fishing around at the moment as well is apparently Ryan Reynolds is returning as well to the DC fold.
Well, how official is this? Because I think it's been touted a bit, but I don't know if it's backed by anything.
Well, it came out in the same article that broke the Michael Keaton news before Michael Keaton came out. So there's a bit of a hold on that, like that it is actually happening. Ryan Reynolds hasn't said anything yet, but apparently has been kind of cheeky with some of the things that he has said. He has famously come out before and said that he would love to come back and play Green Lantern at some stage. So I suppose if they are going to put Green Lantern into something and Ryan Reynolds is willing to do it, why would you not?
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's like the star of the Marvel universe now, so why not?
Yeah, and that crossover kind of thing, not crossover, but like doing Marvel and DC at the same time, it seems to have kind of become more acceptable. Like, I don't know whether this whole new DC news is going to change anything, but Michael Keaton, I believe, was supposed to do a Marvel film in the not too distant future, so it's like they must be more and more okay with...
Well, the comic companies themselves are usually on actually quite good terms.
Yeah.
I think it might be more studio-based where there would be a conflict. But
because in the early days, they said no one who had ever been in the DC universe would be in Marvel. That was the statement that was made, but they seem to have kind of lapsed that over the years now with people...
Yeah, it's kind of a dumb statement to make, to be honest. But
yeah,
I can understand like there would be scheduling conflicts for actors and stuff, so it's not like a comic book. It's harder in that sense, but... I don't know. I think the companies have worked together well in the past, and the creators have all kind of shared back and forth and done things with each other, and I think that's totally what needs to happen here.
Yeah.
And the way that they can sometimes self-reference, like Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool is, making jokes that don't make the costume green or animated, stuff like that. It's like, that's hilarious. Like, throw it back and forth, I think.
Yeah.
And that would actually make them both more successful, I think.
Yeah. The Ruby Rose news as well.
Yes, more Bat news.
Tell us a little bit about what's happened there.
So Ruby Rose, playing Batwoman in the TV series, is no longer Batwoman in the TV series. She's handed in her notice. So I'm not sure who's coming next. It's a little bit sad, actually. But
how will that sit with you, though, as someone who's watched the show? How will you cope with watching somebody else move into that role? Because it's something that over the years they tend not to do with television series, because it has been a bit of a death knell when they've done it in the past. And of course we all watch television series where they've had to bring someone else in to play a role or something like that, and never quite the same. But yeah, how do you feel about that?
I suppose there are ways they could do it, in the sense of, again, they keep bringing up all this multiverse stuff. So if they have another sort of Flashpoint type thing, or Crisis on Infinite whatevers, you could have this thing again of the actress is replaced because, on a different Earth she looked different. The actress playing her sister could actually play both roles. They could be, because they were twins. So
Yeah.
that would be an interesting move to make. It's disappointing because I really enjoyed her in the role. Look, there's probably improvements that could have been made on the series, but that's not down to her. I think I liked her performances, but yeah, it's a bit of a shock. So I do feel a little bit up in the air about where all the shows might be going anyway, because most of them have been around for a while now, and it's like, are they kind of getting to an end? What's changing? There's been a hint of maybe one of the characters is becoming Green Lantern now, and stuff like that. So whatever comes next is going to be a bit of a game changer anyway. So I guess we just have to grin and bear it for now.
It might be seamless. Like I told you recently about an actor's switch up in a show that you watched that you didn't even realise had happened with Reggie with Riverdale. So
yeah, true. But then it was probably a while since, because I would have watched season 1 in like a hit, and then had to wait a while for season 2 to come out, and by that time, yeah.
Can we talk about what's happening with Riverdale at the moment? Because this is frustrating me to no end. Like, for people here in Australia, this season of Riverdale is the season that keeps on going and going and going and going, because we keep on getting these huge gaps. And what we had about a month ago, they dropped 2 episodes on us, and now we haven't had another episode. I've already looked on IMDb and realised it wasn't the season finale, what we saw, so there's more episodes to come, but we were almost going a month between episodes.
Well, this season has been a bit weird as well, because it keeps hitting these points where you think it's a finale,
Yeah.
and then a couple of weeks later there's another episode, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's still more, and then, so I can't even remember what I last saw, and I'm like, did I see a finale? Because all the other shows...
According to IMDb, it's not the finale, there's still episodes to come in this season.
Well, I can't even figure out if Batwoman and Flash are still going or have ended, because it doesn't seem like it really hit a finale.
Yeah.
But then again, stuff was resolved, so I'm like, was that the end? Because it was just everything has just sort of ended in a whimper lately, that I can't tell if it's ended or if it's still going.
With shows like that on Netflix, though, would you rather that they actually held it off and put it all up as a season, or... especially now that we don't seem to be getting episodes every week like we were with different, like previously, would you actually prefer that they hold it on to it and all put it up at one time, or?
I don't know. That can be annoying as well. I remember watching a series and it kind of got to a point where no more episodes were coming out. And then I find out when the next season started that I've missed 5 or 6 episodes because they released them later as a chunk, and I'm like, oh, when did that happen? So I had to go back, watch the end of season 2 before season 3 started.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I want them to hold them off, but at least not more than 2 weeks apart. That would be good. Or at least have some kind of thing at the end of an episode to say more episodes will be due on this date, or
Yeah, I just found it's been so much easier with like 13 Reasons Why and Outer Banks when they've just dropped the slab, and because then I can sit down and binge watch, ring up my boss and tell him I'm not coming to work tomorrow, I'm sick, and watch 13 Reasons Why in one great big slab. Like, I see the advantage of that. I also see the advantage though of being able to like tie out suspense with shows if you go week by week, but I think that becomes an issue when it's not week by week anymore.
Yeah.
Like
it depends on your production as well, because those things that come out in a slab are usually Netflix productions.
Yeah.
Whereas CW does Riverdale and all the other
100,
like the DC hero shows and stuff. So you're kind of down to how they release stuff, but unless there's some major event happening that makes a news thing interrupt the regular broadcast. There really shouldn't be this sporadic release of episodes, and I can't understand why it happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's better than what used to happen in Australia. Like,
2 years later, we get them.
Yeah, but also like things like with One Tree Hill, I remember, and Channel 10 were the worst for it here in Australia. I remember when One Tree Hill came out, they put 4 episodes on. It was like the new show. It was highly billed. This is the new Dawson's Creek. Everyone's going to love it. They played 4 episodes and the ratings weren't what Channel 10 thought it was going to be. So they just didn't show anymore. As a result, One Tree Hill became one of the highest sold DVD box sets in Australian history because everyone who was a fan of the show went out and bought it. You also had weird things like, I think it was Jericho, when Jericho came out, where they decided to put it on 2 nights a week. One night it was on 8:30, one night it was on 9:30. One of the episodes came out and it should have been on the 8:30 night, but because it had a higher rating than the other episode, they switched them. So you had episodes played out of order in a show like Jericho, where it's like, and I remember a character died in the episode that was put on as number 2, but should have been number 1. And I remember I was watching it with my mum, and they were referring to this character dying. My mum's looking at me and going, "Did we see her die? Like
that wasn't memorable."
What happened? And then like the next night, she's back and she dies in that episode, and it's like. At least they don't treat shows with that kind of disdain. Well, same with Dawson's Creek here in Australia. The first few seasons of Dawson's Creek was a rating bonanza for Channel 10, so it was on 7:30 Saturday nights. And then as the show went on and there was only hardcore fans left watching it, they moved it to like midnight on like Friday night. I think in the end, the last season was actually on at midday. They put it on for one entire month to do the whole last season so that they could say they aired it, put it on at midday during the day, and the big Dawson's Creek finale movie was actually like almost treated like a daytime movie. It was on from midday until 2 o'clock. So
that's spectacularly bad. Well, I remember way back when Babylon 5 was on TV. I loved that show.
That used to go out of order too, didn't it? Was that one of the ones?
Well, probably did back then. But they showed the first 4 episodes, I think, like they did with your show, and just said, this isn't the ratings we were hoping. Okay, we're going to chuck it on at 2 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
And that's horrible for something you've just gotten into. And it's like, well, I'm a kid. I can't stay up till 2 a.m. I can try, but I'll get the crap beaten out of me.
And they used to do it with our own Australian series as well. I remember Farscape started off in prime time and then ended up like in some godforsaken hour as well. The big one that happened to in Australia, and it was really weird, was now I think you guys, if you're listening in America, know the show as the McGregor Saga, but here it was known as The Man from Snow River, the television series. They had high hopes that was going to be a real ratings bonanza, and it was in America, but not in Australia. So here in Australia, it started off, I think, 7:30 Friday nights. They put it on like as this is going to be huge. It's got Guy Pearce in it. For people in America, you'll also know, I think it was one of Hugh Jackman's first roles. He popped up in a couple of episodes. It didn't do that well here. So it ended up becoming Sunday afternoon television. And,
I remember seeing it on Sunday.
I remember I got addicted to the show, like, because I grew up loving stuff like A Country Practice and all of that, and I was like, man, this show is really cool. I used to like stay home on Sundays because I wanted to watch The Men from Snow River, but again, it's become one of those shows that became really popular on DVD because people in Australia were like, what is this show? I've never seen it. It's like, because it was hidden away on a Sunday afternoon. That's why you never saw it.
Oh, how about Smallville in Australia?
Yes.
They aired like the first season. Did they start season 2, I think? And then it just like disappeared because, Channel 9 bought this thinking it's huge, and it's like, we don't really like this. We don't like things that are not news and sport.
Yeah.
And then just didn't even air it. It didn't even go to that 2 a.m. time slot.
Yeah.
So about 2.5 years later, Channel 10, I think it was, bought it.
Yeah.
And aired it in a complete run from where it left off in season 2 all the way up to the end of season 4, I think. So we had it like every night, and like that was awesome for a while, and then it was like, oh, now I've got to wait a week. And
Buffy and Angel was kind of the same. I remember that started off in prime time. Buffy did.
Yeah, that movie
started in prime time, and then that became like, was it 10:30 for Buffy and then
10.
11:30 for Angel or
Or
something?
maybe it was 9:30 and 10:30.
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Because I remember that was on a night when I used to have classes at film school, and I used to have to rush home like, to watch Buffy and Angel. But yeah, it's weird the way that they do that here in Australia. Like even
very weird.
and even like for shows like Neighbours, which is probably one of Australia's biggest exports, that's now hidden away here in Australia on a digital channel. It's like, it's so weird because the show is so popular overseas, but here in Australia, it's kind of like it's hidden away on a digital station at 6 o'clock.
At the same time, I don't think we kind of check things very well, like how popular something is.
Yeah.
I mean, as examples we gave earlier, it was like 4 episodes. If it's not like topping the charts, we hide it away. Well, that's the first 4 or 5 episodes are always the worst of a TV show. Like the very worst, because it hasn't found its feet yet. After that is when shows start to get good.
Yeah.
So you need to give it the season. And if the season is just horrible and everyone just hates it, and you know the public hates it, not just some critic who's paid to hate it, but if people are reacting negatively to it, like, I can understand you want to move it away from the prime time slot, but if you're going to invest in it in the first place, just keep it there.
I also remember them saying with One Tree Hill that it didn't appeal to the demographic that they wanted it to appeal to. I think they wanted it to be the new 90210, and they expected that the age group who liked it would be like from 13 to 18, which was the market that Channel 10 wanted because they had advertising revenue for that. One Tree Hill ended up appealing to people who were aged 18 to 35. It was actually people who had already been through high school who ended up loving the show, and it did actually rate really high in that demographic, but it wasn't the demographic that Channel 10 wanted, so they bumped it.
This is where they should actually do a test market first.
Yeah.
Like, do test screenings, and if it's going to tick the boxes you want, well, you know where to stick it at least.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the problem with the show as well. They wanted it to be a new Dawson's Creek, but the problem with One Tree Hill was One Tree Hill kind of had, I want to say, almost more of an appeal for males in the first season because it was basketball orientated. And I think Australia struggles with that. I know they did the same with Friday Night Lights. Friday Night Lights was really big in America, and Channel 9 started to screen it here in Australia, and they realised that there's people watching it, but it's 18 to 35-year-old males, and we don't really want to target that, so they scrapped it again. And it's like, I find that really weird that they kind of say this is the time slot that we want for this demographic, and like, you would think at the end of the day numbers is all they care about. So if you've got Friday Night Lights up against MasterChef, if like
look, I get that there's like sponsorships and ad sales involved in these things, but like, don't sell ad space for a whole season ahead of time. Sell it a couple of weeks ahead, and if you find that's not the demographic you're finding, then say, okay, we're gonna give you ad space elsewhere and find and then get the other demographic to
And I also wonder how they do those numbers, because if you go to, say, like even today, if you go to a Supernova or a Comic Con, there are thousands of people there that loved Farscape, and it's like, but the numbers of people who watched it in Australia don't resemble that. So it's like, and I know there was a big thing at one point that they were saying that it was only like 1,000 homes in Australia that actually had that thing plugged into their television. So they're basically saying if 100 people out of 1,000 watch a show, then they say, okay, so 10% are watching this show, and they calculate that figure. But you could have 1,000 people who all have a very similar taste in something, like, and you might not have that geek kind of culture, because now they're bringing back Farscape. Pre-COVID, they announced that Farscape was returning. So it's like...
Do you remember Roseanne, the show? They had an episode like that where they had the Nielsen set-top thing on their TV. and they didn't want everyone to think that they were just low rent trash, white trash people. So every night they would put on documentaries and things that they would never watch, and they all hated it. But it's just like, no, I'm not going to have them thinking that we're poor white trash and we're not educated, blah, 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 blah. In the end of the episode, they take the Nielsen tracker away from them, and they're saying, well, you were obviously, fudging it, because there's no way you watched all that stuff. So
yeah. And it's really interesting because, like, you watch something like Gogglebox, where it actually is in average Australians' lounge rooms.
But then they're told to watch specific things, so that's another...
Yeah, but this is what I was going to say. They watch something like MasterChef and basically talk about how rubbish it is, but the numbers going on how many people watch MasterChef according to Nielsen don't reflect that.
Yeah.
So if you're showing... and Gogglebox have a pretty good demographic, like a mixture of demographics of people watching the shows. And you've got 6 families, and 5 of the 6 are hating MasterChef. How does that then reflect Nielsen, who turn around and say, 70% of Australians are watching MasterChef? It's really weird.
I know they do go through some kind of demographic checkbox thing to say, okay, here's people of certain ages and backgrounds and interests, so we should be sort of covered. But, everyone's different. Unless every, TV set or set-top box is actually sending you information at the time, you don't actually know.
And you get people who are very different as well. Like, you and I have a very close friend, Phil Freeman, who is in her 80s, and she would watch shows that you and I would watch. She loved Buffy, she loved Angel and stuff like that. Right. Whereas most 80-year-old people who have probably got the Nielsen home scan are falling asleep after the 7:30 report of a nighttime kind of thing. So, it's weird. And like I said, I think the Netflix system is good in that sense, but I just wish there was some kind of rule for how it works with episodes, because
but that's not down to them, that's down to who's making it. So, but that is freakishly annoying. It's actually funny that it happens that way, though, because normally they get things a bit later than the airtime. So for them to be getting interrupted like that is very weird.
Yeah, so if anyone can tell us what's going on with Riverdale, why it's happening at the moment, log onto our website and let us know. Now, that brings us to the next section of our show. What have we been watching?
Ooh, well, yes, I've pretty much been stuck on Netflix lately. Season 5 of Teen Titans Go has come onto Netflix, so I've been enjoying that wholeheartedly. Even had, I just watched one where the Scooby-Doo characters crossed over into it. So.
Is the drumming dolphin back?
I haven't seen the dolphin yet, but they have had a few callbacks to certain things that have come up previously. The Booty Scooty song has appeared 2 or 3 times so far. But yeah, a lot of fun, and just the way they point out certain things is just great. I love what this show does. I hope it never ends. What else have I been watching? Season 3 of Dark, the German time travel drama. Really interesting, but I kind of feel like maybe they kind of hurried it to a conclusion this season. So I'm guessing there's no more of that to come. But yeah, again, love that show in and out. I could rewatch that. And what else? I have been watching back on the mental health topic. It's called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. It's a Korean drama. I do love my Korean dramas. A little bit different this one. There's a sort of romance-ish trying to be rude, but it's one of them is really not into it, and he's like the main character, and he has a handicapped older brother, so he's been responsible for him his whole life, so he doesn't really have much freedom to do anything else. From their childhood, there was this weird little girl with clearly had issues, and now she's an adult, but she writes children's books which are really quite dark, and the older brother loves these books. So it kind of comes to a situation where these characters all meet again, but it takes a few sort of dark turns because it is all about mental health and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. There's something really gripping about it. It's kind of endearing in some ways and kind of like what the in others, and but it's got me hooked. But it's one where like 2 episodes are released a week, so it's like, oh damn it, I just want to keep watching.
Yeah. Well, this morning I actually went to the media screening of a film that I think is definitely going to be in my top 10 films of the year. It's called Waves, and it's a brand new film out of America from director Trey Edward Schultz. Trent Reznor did the soundtrack for the film, but it's a very kind of Larry Clark-esque film in that it revolves around a character called Tyler, played by Kelvin Harrison Jr., and he's a promising young wrestler at high school, and his dad is very kind of domineering. And
his name's familiar. Why do I?
Yeah, he's been in a few things over the past couple of years. He was in It Comes at Night, the horror movie.
Don't know.
Things like that, but I think everyone will know him after this, because I can actually really see Waves perhaps getting some Oscar attention next year. But it's one of those movies where you don't want to talk about too much of the story because you don't want to give stuff away. But basically everything seems good in Tyler's life. Like, he's got a girlfriend, Lexus. She's a cheerleader. He's the high school champion wrestler. Then he starts to develop a shoulder injury, which he feels that he can't tell his dad about because his dad basically wants him to use wrestling to get into college and everything like that.
Yep.
Some really bad events happen, and I mean really bad, like Larry Clark bad events, which is probably the scope for anyone that's watched movies like Kids and stuff like that will know. And then the second half of the story revolves around Tyler's sister, Emily, played by Taylor Russell, who is dealing with what happened in the first half of it. But it's just one of those... It's a kind of long film. Like, it goes for over 2 hours, but you don't notice it because of the way that the film does it. But the film also does this really interesting thing where the director has made the film so that the focus ratio changes depending on what's happening in the story. And as Tyler's life starts to get more trapping and feeling like it's breaking, the ratio goes tighter and tighter. So in the end, it's just one square, like on the screen. And it's interesting because apparently, this movie is getting good traction in America, and normally that kind of thing would annoy an American audience.
Yeah.
So, I really liked that. The other film that I just watched in the last couple of days as well is this brand new horror called The Shed, which is just coming out in Australia on VOD. But it's a weird kind of horror to discuss, but it basically is about this boy called Stan, played by J.J. Warren, and he suddenly has a vampire living in the shed at the bottom of his garden, and once it kills his grandfather, he doesn't know what to do. He's on probation after being in juvenile detention. He's now scared that he's going to get the blame for killing his grandfather because of what's happened. So he tries to keep it a secret. His best mate finds out about the vampire and decides what a great way to get rid of people that we don't like, including like the school bullies. But it's not comical. It's actually like a really hardcore kind of horror. At the same time, he is also in love with his best friend Roxy, played by Sophia Happenin. And so it's like a coming-of-age story, but as one of the characters says, with a pet vampire in the garage down the back. So I shouldn't laugh and make it sound comical, because it actually is a pretty horrific horror. But that teamed up with The Wretched, which I also saw last week as well, about a witch living next door to teenagers. There's been
I see a theme going on. So if you're thinking of making a movie, teenagers and some monster living around them.
The Wretched was actually pretty good for people here in Australia who are wanting to go out and see some of the only few new films that are in cinemas. The Wretched's out in cinemas now, and it's actually pretty decent. They're very similar stories, actually. The kid in that is on probation as well. Goes to live with his dad for the summer because he's on probation, and his mum says, go live with your dad for a bit. And he arrives there and he suspects that there's something sus about the woman who lives next door. And it turns out that she's just become possessed by a 1,000-year-old child-eating witch. So, again, pretty horrific, but yeah, another coming-of-age horror film, really. So going on from that, our next segment that we love to do in this show is called Bring It Back. And today it's Harley's turn to talk about a show that he would like to see brought back.
I'm just waiting a moment to have my logo stop singing in my head. And okay, bringing it back. So I was going to say a different show, but since we've been talking about Michael Keaton and Batman and where he might be going with that, an animated series that many of us loved in the 90s was Batman Beyond, which is it followed on from the Batman animated series that was out at the time, and it was when Batman was about, or Bruce Wayne I should say, 70 years old. He had to give up being Batman because of a heart condition, and one day
hips.
Yeah, all those fun things that happen.
He no longer takes a tumble, it's called a fall.
Yeah, basically down the stairs to the Batcave, and that's him gone, shattered. His bat bone powder at the end of that one.
Can't sleep through the night anymore, has to get up 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, constantly in the toilet. With the technology in the future though, the bat suit has a built-in toilet. Or probably did actually. So Batman Beyond focused on this teenager Terry McGinnis actually being rescued by Bruce Wayne when he's being chased by a gang called the Jokers, who are basically just gangs that paint their faces like the Joker, who hasn't been seen for many years, by the way. And it's kind of a dark Gotham City in the future, but things have progressed and there's all sorts of high-tech stuff going on. But this Terry McGinnis finds himself at Wayne Manor, and Bruce Wayne comes out as tough and mean as ever, and with hardly any effort fights off the Jokers and sends them running. But of course the strain is a bit much for him, so Terry takes him inside and somehow then finds his way down to the Batcave. And once he learns all of this, Batman is real, and finds the suit, which is one size fits all conveniently. He decides to go out on a little revenge kick when his father is murdered. So it's kind of the Batman tale retold, except he doesn't have the years of training that Bruce Wayne went through, so Bruce Wayne is basically trying to teach him on the go as he tries to become this new Batman for a future age. So it was a real hit. I think the only reason it didn't continue was some kind of politics with the networks or something at the time. That was just, it just didn't make sense not to continue. It was such a huge and popular show, and it's come back as comics since then, and so it's kind of progressed the story a lot. And now with Michael Keaton playing older Bruce Wayne, there is a hint that it's they're going to do the live action movie, which I think they were trying to do like 10-20 years ago or something, and then they cancelled it. So it has been in the zeitgeist of things we want to happen. But look, even as an animated series, it would be great to come back. I think it could do with some reworking. At the time, it was very hard to do because it was set in the future and they hadn't finished detailing what had happened in the past.
Yeah.
So I think they had sort of just finished the Batman cartoon, but that Batman was still appearing in Justice League cartoon, so there were still things happening that they had to try to figure out, well, we can't always definitively say this happened because that character is still doing something with someone else back there. And so it was kind of certain things that would happen in the show would be based on what was happening in the other cartoons of the time.
Yeah.
So it was kind of being led down a certain path, even though it was like 20, 30 years in the future sort of thing. So it was a bit difficult at the time, but now you could kind of have free reign with it. So I don't know. You haven't seen this one, have you?
No, I haven't, but I do actually want to see it now. And I guess like what we normally do here is, how would you cast it now? Like, and what would you do with the story?
Well, I think a lot of people would be quite happy if it came back sort of as it was, continuing on.
If it was real life, if it was real action though, who would you cast?
If it was live action, look, I totally would love to have Michael Keaton in there as Bruce Wayne, and I think we're going to have that.
Yeah.
I would actually kind of go a little bit down a different path. The way they set things up in the show was that sort of Nightwing and Robin and Batgirl were sort of all gone. There was no one else in Bruce Wayne's life at this time. And slowly over time you start to find out what happened to some of the characters. The comics have since done a lot more with it. But instead of having one of those existing characters as the next Batman, they pulled this other character from out of nowhere sort of thing. I actually think it might be fun to have one of the former Robins become the next Batman, but
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Well, you know what? That would actually be quite fun. But if they want to do it like it originally was, with basically a school senior type character,
yeah,
then I don't know who you'd cast.
Zac Efron.
Say, Batman musical.
Come on, he's got
Batman musical. Let's do it. Yeah,
he's got the rig for it at the moment. That's one of the things I was thinking about.
Years, I am the knight. I am the Batman.
I was thinking of the fact like he's got the rig for it now. Like since he did Baywatch and stuff like that, he's kind of kept it. So,
well, it's true. The Terry McGinnis new Batman character is a wrestler at school. So that's kind of where he gets his fighting and his build from. So they try to make it not completely ridiculous that this guy is putting on the suit, even though the suit has all this built-in tech and takes the hit from all the punches and stuff. You still want some sense in there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a funny thing. I would like them to kind of maybe do a change. Like, I don't normally like things being changed or rebooted from scratch, and I would be happy for it to go on as it did, because there's a whole lot more they can build in this future Gotham City world. But if they kind of brought it a little closer to where a Batman we know from its, long history in the comics, you could bring in some of those characters that were never mentioned or couldn't be used or that sort of thing. And I would actually like the third Robin, Tim Drake, to become the new Batman. I think the way he was built up in the comics, he was becoming his own sort of character to rival sort of Bruce Wayne. And then all of a sudden they did one of these things where they change history and it's all completely different, and he wasn't half as good as he used to be, so it was like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, look, there's so many alternatives you could happen there. But again, the casting, that's a hard one. I would like to see people who had kind of been in it before. So in the Tim Burton films, I think it was supposed to be Marlon Wayans was going to be Robin the Boy Wonder, but then they didn't end up using him in the second movie, and it just left from there. But I would love him to come back as Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
I think he should come in and just make that all like canon.
Yeah. Because for me, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that whole storyline in
The Christopher Nolan
series,
series,
and not just because I really love him as an actor, but I found his Robin like kind of interesting. I know there's that whole argument, was he really Robin kind of thing, but come on, the dude's name was Robin. It was pretty obvious. I really wanted to see that get expanded. Like, I was kind of disappointed when Christopher Nolan said, look, I'm sorry, you're not going to see that. Like, because I thought an ex-cop...
It was a bit of a throwaway thing just as a bit of a shout-out to call him Robin, because he was like the sidekick of the movie. But
he did know all of Batman's secrets by the end of it as well.
At the end, he was given the keys to the Batcave and basically said, it's all yours. So he was going to be Batman after that.
Yeah.
And look, that last movie was terrible. I'm sorry. It was just horrible. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. Following on from the second one, it was like, that doesn't make any sense.
There was too many. For me, there was too many villains. Yeah, for me in that film, there was too many villains. I thought that they overloaded it. Whereas with the other films, like with The Dark Knight, it was perfect. You had Joker, and you had the beginnings of Two-Face. Like it was. It worked, but then in the last one, it was like, hey, here's Bane, and he's Catwoman, and now we're going to bring in another character, and it was just like, it was overkill. It felt like, it didn't feel like a Christopher Nolan movie, because he doesn't normally do that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I wonder if it was that thing of what happened to the Spider-Man movies, that there was pressure of, you have to have this character in the next movie. But no, we've already written in this character and this character. No, you have to add this character.
Yeah.
Well, that happened in the Batman ones as well, actually. There was always a fight with the studio saying, no, this is a bigger character. No, this is a more interesting character. That's who we're going with. So then you'd have these two villains every time after the second movie.
Yeah.
And, yeah, when Joel Schumacher took over, it didn't work. I'm sorry. If you had kept Tim Burton and Michael Keaton doing the series, it would have been great.
Yeah. Burton was interesting with what happened with Batman, because it was like, I guess like he had enough kind of thing, and he's always been a director that's wanted to go on to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
The same with Christopher Nolan. Like he said he always meant for it to be a trilogy, and that was it. But they did such a great job with what they did that you kind of wanted to see them go on and do more. So
I did until the third movie.
yeah.
That's what always happens, isn't it? The third movie comes and it's like, well, it was good.
Yeah, you almost do wish that with that series it had finished with The Dark Knight, but
if that series had expanded into a DC universe, like, I think everyone was kind of hyped for that at the time, but then it didn't happen. It was like, no, we're just closing off Christopher Nolan's and starting again. I was like, again? Yeah. And
apparently they have thrown money at him, like offers, to come back and do more, like to try and put DC back. But I don't think he will. I think he's one of those directors that he's like Tim Burton. He likes he likes new challenges, but also, not to be rude, but the mess that DC is in at the moment, like, why would you come back, kind of thing.
Look, it's the studio's own fault for getting it where it is, because they trusted Zack Snyder and then decided, oh no, we don't want to trust you now. We want to change everything you're doing.
Yeah.
But it's already underway. Like, you can't...
It's still one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. Why a studio has a director come in and say, look, I've got this idea for like 10 films.
Yeah.
Say, that's brilliant. We love the idea of a love triangle between the three of them. Yep, let's do it. And then killed it dead. But killed it dead when it was already half filmed as well. Like,
I don't think he even wanted 10 films. I think he wanted to do a trilogy originally. And then they wanted to expand it and build this DC universe a bit.
Yeah.
So he sort of bowed a bit and said, okay, let's do this and that. And then it was like, yeah, we know you've done a lot of work. We're just going to take it off you and do something completely different now. Like, why would you do that? Like,
yeah. And not only that, but like the way that they did it as well. Like, I think I've talked about it before, but when you look at his cut, the director's cut, and then you look at the studio cut of Suicide Squad, 10 times better movie when it's the director's cut. It's like,
of course,
why did the studio have such an impact on stuff? And then like everything was going so smoothly as well. Man of Steel was a good film. The director's cut of Suicide Squad was a good film. Wonder Woman was a brilliant film. And then it was like the car accident happened and suddenly Katie couldn't walk anymore. No.
Hold on, Katie, bend your knee.
But it was so weird that it was like they derailed themselves, like, and now like I was talking about this with a friend the other day, and we were talking about like how well Marvel has done, but then you can compare it to DC, and DC have got 2 Academy Awards, like in their trophy now, and it's like, doesn't that make DC realize that when it comes to filmmaking ability, we're actually better than Marvel?
Yeah.
But we're so far behind them because we can't make our universe work the same way as they've made theirs work.
Yeah, you should have people there building a plan like Kevin Feige does for Marvel. And there should be this plan built out and be like, okay, this is where we want to take it to this point in the future. And if that's what Zack Snyder wants to do up to that point, cool. Then
Yeah.
someone else can come in and build upon that.
Yeah.
But you don't say, okay, we like what you've built. Get halfway there and be like, we're going to change everything about it.
Yeah.
Love it, but we don't love it anymore because apparently it's not Marvel enough. Like, you don't want it to be Marvel. If you want Marvel, watch Marvel. But
Yeah.
I've really gotten, frankly, a bit sick of the Marvel movies in the end. It's just those last two Avengers movies put me off so badly. They're terrible. I can't. Like, they have their moments, but it's like, let's just fill all the humor in number 3 and then all the serious stuff in number 4, and then in the end it doesn't sort of work anyway. So
and I think in a sense they've almost done a DC in that it's imploded as well, because again, I was talking with a friend about this the other day, and we were saying about how I loved the original Thor film, and even Thor number 2 wasn't a bad film, I didn't think, but now Thor's become the comedic sidekick.
Yeah, it became really weird. I mean, I loved Ragnarok.
See, I hated Ragnarok.
It's really entertaining because I love Taika Waititi and all of that. But
so do I. But Thor does not laugh when he's
going from these epic, like, Shakespearean kind of scale dramas, and then it's just gone crazy funny. I'm like, look, it was hilarious and it made me laugh, but it's so different from. And I think if you're going to do different, then make every movie different. Yeah. But it just, it didn't have that feel anymore. So it is confusing.
Yeah. For me, what ruined Ragnarok was those scenes where Thor and Bruce Banner are joking as Asgard is falling. It's like neither of those characters would be joking when that is happening, kind of thing. That, to me...
That takes me back to George Clooney in Batman and Robin. And this is why I hate this movie. It's like... big serious scene. You've got Alfred's niece, and they all love Alfred, and he's part of the family. He's like the father figure, and he's there smiling, doing his made-for-TV smile, and it's like, Alfred's dying. Why are you smiling? This is a sad moment, you idiot. Like,
a good soundtrack, though. The Smashing Pumpkins doing a Batman soundtrack was, that gave me wood as a kid. No, I shouldn't say that. But yeah, like, those kinds of things for me are the kinds of things that do ruin a franchise. And like, by the time they got to Fat Thor, and like, oh, let's get a laugh from Fat Thor, it was kind of like, now you've made Thor. Because I'll be honest, going into the Marvel movies, I was always an Iron Man fan. I wasn't a fan of Captain America. I wasn't a fan of Thor. After the first few films came out, I was a Thor and Captain America fan, and to the point that when Captain America was going up against Iron Man, I wanted Captain America to win. Like, whereas with the comics, I would never have felt that way. But then, I felt they kind of lost their way as well.
That's one of the things I always thought was kind of weird. Being Captain America was the good soldier and did what he did for his country and his government and all that. Why is he the one fighting against the government call to, name all superheroes and stuff? Like,
because he become woke.
And then, Tony Stark wasn't. Like, it seemed like they were on the opposite sides of what they naturally would be.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just, that always felt weird to me.
I think when you watch them, though, you can see it happening. Like that. Captain America is distrusting the government more and more because of the stuff that he's seeing, whereas Tony is getting turned on by the fact that the government keep throwing money at him to develop more and more. I think that's actually the point that they were trying to make, was that Captain America can't be bought, he can't be corrupted even by the system that created him,
but
in a sense. So
I think Iron Man's argument wasn't so much the money, it was more the...
It's always about the money.
No, I think it was more about someone has to, like, be responsible for all these superpowers and things coming out. And so you kind of understand, but why not make, like, the Avengers responsible for keeping track of everyone and not any particular government or anything? Because that's just shady for a start.
Yeah.
I would never trust any government with secret identities and stuff.
Anyway, we probably should wrap it up because we've been going on for a little while now, but So we'll be back again very soon with another episode of Subculture, where we'll have more news. We'll have another Bring It Back, and we'll also take a look at what we've been looking at or watching during the time. But for now, I've been Dave G.
And I've been your future Batman. Vote for me to be the next Batman, because apparently there's going to be 100 of them now.
Awesome. Well, we'll be back very, very soon, but goodbye for now.